Good morning, everyone. It is Wednesday, March 13th at 8 a.m., and we will call to order this meeting of the General Government Committee. For roll call, we can dispense with that quickly. All three council members are present, accounted for. So getting right into it, our first order of business is approval of our meeting minutes from our February 14th meeting. Is
So
there
moved.
to approve the minutes? So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Dolph and seconded by Councilmember Kathy. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, motion passes unanimously. Thank you. So our first substantive piece of the agenda is the selection of our committee chair for the upcoming year. Lisa, you're on the list here to help us walk through that, but I think it's rather a simple affair in terms of motions and seconds and so on and so forth. But I don't know
It
if
is.
there's anything else you want to add?
It is. I have great confidence in your abilities to get through this one. I just wanted to we've asked all of the committees to basically evaluate and either affirm or amend their meeting date and time. And specifically what has been the issue for a couple of, particularly the Public Works Committee and potentially this committee in 2024 in particular is determining whether or not are you going to advertise as a 60-minute, are you going to expect 90 minutes? The amount of material that we're expecting to bring to you, but this committee in particular, because of the comp plan amendment process, we're concerned that we're not going to be able to be done in 60 minutes. And so we were hoping that you would clarify that this is a 90-minute meeting and that if we get done in 60 minutes or less, that's a bonus. So that's the only thing we ask that you discuss for us.
You're not going to ask us to make the time later?
You can make the time however and wherever you would like it to be, and we will be here to support you.
Well, the candidate that I wanted to, be the chair hasn't shown up yet. So I'm going to go with the three that are here, three of us.
Well, should we maybe talk about meeting time first and then we can move into nominations and stuff? It doesn't really matter the order, I don't think, but I think advertising for 90 minutes makes sense because we will probably have more meetings that bridge across the 9 a.m. hour, assuming that people are also okay with 8 a.m., which is the time that does happen to work best for my personal schedule. But open to thoughts or suggestions to alternatives as well.
I'm fine with 90 minutes. Because of the cap, if we finish sooner, that's fine. We don't have to stay and talk about something else or anything.
Yeah, public health and safety moved to 90 minutes as well. So I think that's good for general government as well. And I know it doesn't work best for Joan, but she's an amazing team player, and 8 a.m. does work best with my schedule as well, because just working full time and meetings either early or later work best for me regarding like the daytime when to have a meeting.
Okay. So it sounds like 90 minutes works and 8 a.m. and the second Wednesday of the month kind of continues to be an all right day as well. Okay. I don't think we need a motion for that. Okay, so far for chair, I guess we can open it up. And if are there any nominations?
I'd like to nominate Michael Althauser to continue being chair.
I second that.
All right, well, thank you. I think under the rules, I have to say, are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? I'm not sure if that's an actual rule or if it's just sort of become the protocol to call for it 3 times, but
I think Robert's rules does say 3 times, but you don't have to.
okay. So hearing no other nominations, there's a motion to appoint me to continue as the chair, which I would welcome your support to continue on in this role. I appreciate your confidence and your support. So all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you so much. So moving into our briefings now, our next item on the agenda is a discussion item regarding the Thurston County Rental Assistance Survey.
All right, thank you. Members of the council this morning, I am slightly disappointed that the Mr. candidate didn't show up for the election this morning, but I guess I'll hold my breath for next year.
As
Yeah.
am I,
Yeah, you showed up late.
As part of our implementation of the Thurston Housing Action Plan, the General Government Committee has requested current information about renters in our community. Joining us this morning is Alyssa Sparkman, who is the communication specialist from the Thurston County Public Health and Social Services Office at the Housing and Homeless Prevention. She also works closely with the Regional Housing Council. Alyssa will be presenting the results of the 2023 survey of Thurston County residents who received COVID-19 rent assistance, also known as the Emergency Rent Assistance Program, ERAP, and the Treasury Rent Assistance Program, TRAP. I will turn it over to Alyssa. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you all for having me. It's Elisa. I know it's
My apologies.
all right. It's a hard name to pronounce. So thank you so much, Brad, for that introduction. I'm going to share a PowerPoint. Just take me a second to get it into presentation mode. All right. So as Brad said, I'm the communication specialist at Thurston County Office of Housing and Homeless Prevention. And this is a relatively new position. I've been in it for just about a year now. Before that, I was in the role as the Healthy Homes Program Coordinator for Thurston County Public Health and Social Services. And during COVID, I was kind of pulled to help manage the COVID rent assistance program. So that was ERAP and TRAP is how you're probably used to hearing it. So that's money that Thurston County sent out in the form of rent and utility use assistance to renters from the fall of 2020 to around the summer. The last payments went out in early July 2023. So in those 3 years, Thurston County provided around 53.5 million in rent and utility assistance, which is a huge amount. And so we thought we needed to figure out what the impact was, and also more importantly, how are renters doing after that? Do they still need rent assistance? What are the current needs? So in August of 2023, we sent out a survey. It was an online survey in English and in Spanish through SurveyMonkey. And we had about a 30% response rate, which is what our goal was. So we were pretty happy to receive out of the under 2,000 that we were able to send directly. So we had some, duplicate email addresses and ineligible recipients, because we're looking at people who received the assistance, and some people had applied and maybe not qualified. And then there were undeliverable emails and all that. So after that deduplication, and we wound up with about a 30% response rate and 541 eligible surveys to include in this data that I'm going to share with you today. One of the things.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Jonah.
Thanks. Good to see you. You look good at 8 in the morning. Pretty good. We usually see you late in the afternoon.
I'm more of a morning person.
You're what?
I'm a morning person.
Oh, okay. The amount that we had to distribute, did you request it based on anything in Thurston County, or was that just what we received by some formula?
That's a good question. It was mostly allocated. And I'm not sure what the allocation was, likely population, but I'm not 100% sure. But then towards the end of when we ran out of funds, we would request more. And so some counties in the state weren't able to meet some of the deadlines for spending out their funds. And so they had to send money back, or they didn't use all of their money that was allocated. And so we were able to request that funding because we had a pretty good system set up for getting the funds out pretty quickly. So we did end up getting to use additional funds more than we were allocated, and we did spend it all. We could have
Oh,
kept
Good, thank you for that.
All right, and so when we sent out the survey, we did offer an incentive. 15 random winners received a $100 Visa gift card, and that was very popular. People were really interested in receiving that incentive, and I do think it helped get our response rate up to how we'd hoped. So moving into the respondent data. So the heads of households that responded to the survey on behalf of their household were mostly between the ages of 25 and 44. And so this is just that the person who responded on behalf of their household. So it doesn't mean that every single person in their household was of the age represented here, or the race and ethnicity represented here. You can see that we also have the county census population to show kind of in comparison what kind of how we did in terms of getting a good sample of all the different race and ethnicities that we have here in our county. And we did pretty well. It seems like we did not reach as many of the Asian, South Asian, or Asian American families, but in the other groups, we did relatively well to our census population. And then it was mostly women who responded on behalf of their household. So now that the respondents shared information about their household as a whole, most households were 1 or 2 people households. And we asked what your current living situation is. 19 of the households were currently homeless or in between places, living with friends and family, basically saying that they're currently not renting anywhere. And also 2 households said they no longer rent because they now own a home, which is technically statistically insignificant. But I think it's kind of important to highlight that there are some people who now, I mean, there are 2 households that reported that they now own a home, which is a big deal, I think, for people who are currently, struggling to pay rent during COVID. And then the remaining responses varied among the common rental situations, with over half of respondents living, renting in an apartment. All right, so we asked, did you receive utility assistance along with rent? Most people did, which is good. It was protocol to ask people if they had an outstanding utility bill that needed that they could use help with. And so of this 54%, we asked if you received a utility shutoff notice after you received that utility assistance, because we really wanted to know how people are doing after this help. So most people didn't, which is great. And of the small, the 20% that said yes, so remember that's 20% of this 54%. So we're getting down to some pretty small numbers here. Most people were able to pay before their utilities were shut off, and some people had their utilities shut off, but they are back on. We asked about evictions. Were you served an eviction notice or a notice to pay or vacate after receiving your rent assistance? 39% said yes. And what we asked this 39%, so if you said yes, you got another question. What was the outcome of that pay or vacate notice? Most people had their eviction prevented. About 14% they moved before that 14-day pay or vacate, or it may not have been 14 days, but most of them are 14 days. Some are, I believe, 30. They moved out before the notice ended, either with kind of working with the landlord or not. 13% still had an eviction in process, and only 2% were evicted by court order. So now we're getting down again to kind of these small numbers. Of the 71% that had their eviction prevented, we asked what prevented your eviction. A good amount of people who had their evictions prevented found a way to pay the rent, or had the eviction resolution pilot program at the dispute resolution center help them with the repayment plan. And that's how their eviction was prevented. So I think that shows how Thurston County was one of the counties who had a really great experience with the eviction resolution pilot program. I think a lot of that had to do with the eviction resolution pilot program working really closely with rent assistance, with the ERAP and TRAP teams, and also with the volunteer legal assistance, so the eviction attorneys. We all worked really closely together during this time. All right, so when we're asking about what your situation is like now, this is kind of one of the hardest, I guess the toughest pills to swallow. How much of your current income goes to rent and utilities? 75% responded that all or almost all of their utilities go to rent and utilities. So 32%, all of it, my rent and utilities are equal to or higher than my monthly income. 43% said almost all of their rent and utilities go. Almost all of their income goes to rent and utilities. So they sometimes don't have enough for essential needs like food and gas. 21% said they can cover their rent and utilities, but nothing beyond their essential needs. Only 4% reported that they're doing okay. They can cover rent, utilities, essential needs, and some additional comforts. That 4% is only about 25 people who responded to this survey. So this tells us that renters are really struggling to make ends meet in Thurston County. We asked, what are your current needs for additional rent assistance? So the responses that they could choose from were, I need rent assistance now and likely for the rest of my life, now and likely for the next several years. Those two responses, and even now and likely for another year, those are people who would need more long-term rent assistance. And then I need rent assistance now for the next several months or just to get caught up. I don't need rent assistance now, but I will need it if I have an emergency. And then you can see this 5% that said they don't need it now and they don't think they'll need it in the future. Kind of, it matches what we saw on the previous slide about the 4% that basically said they're doing okay. So I'm going to break this down a little bit into some other, in a kind of another view. We're going to look at like how many respondents. So if 71% of those respondents currently need rent assistance. That is 381 households out of the 541 that responded. 86 of them, that was the first two, reported that they need long-term assistance. So those are the people who say they need it now and likely for the rest of their life or for the next several years. 25% of respondents will need rent assistance if they have an emergency. That's 132 households, and only 25 households reported that they don't need it now and don't think they'll need it in the future. So we're going to take that and kind of compare it with what's available now in Thurston County. The availability of rent assistance is our Eviction Prevention Rent Assistance Program. It was new last year. It's funded through a provision of document recording fees. In Thurston County, we began serving clients in April of last year. So we're looking at just about a year of this program. And in 2023, from April to September, only 162 households were served. And so that's like county-wide. If we look at what the need is from just this 541 people who responded to the survey, this program wouldn't even be enough to serve the people that just filled out this survey. So this program, the funding is falling drastically short of what our community needs. The program is continuously at capacity with closed wait lists. And in 2023, the funding was around 1.5 million. And if you compare that to the 3 years of COVID, where we had around an average of 17 million per year, it's a big difference. So there's been a big shift in the availability of rent assistance in Thurston County, and it was pretty sudden. We asked about rent increases because that's on a lot of people's minds. I think we hear anecdotally about rent increases a lot, and 75% of respondents experienced a rent increase. And we said since October 2021, because that's when rent increases were allowed again after the eviction moratorium. And so 75% received a rent increase of $100 per month or more since then. And some people, this is around 43 people, received rent increases of $600 or more per month. So this is a lot. So we are seeing quite a, moderate rent increases to really high ones. And so what does that mean for the impact on homelessness? Homelessness and housing stability, are highly correlated with rent increases. So this is a graph from the Washington State Department of Commerce. The blue line is median rent, and the red dotted line is per capita unsheltered homelessness. We know that increased rents does correlate with increased homelessness. We asked respondents if they've had any of their members of their household have reported to be experiencing homelessness in the last 5 years, and 35 respondents said yes. So sorry, 34. So I said I was a morning person earlier. I take that back. Obviously I'm not. I haven't done this at 8 a.m. before. So 34%, that's 185 households out of the 539 that responded to this question that had somebody in their household experience homelessness in the last 5 years. So we also know that, a recent experience of homelessness, you're at higher risk for returning to homelessness. The last question we asked on the survey was just, is there anything else you want to share about your experience with rent assistance? And most of the responses were overwhelmingly of gratitude, just people saying, thank you so much, my family and I, we would be homeless without this program. So a lot of thank yous. The biggest critique was that it took too long, that people waited too long for the assistance. It's really stressful when you're super behind on rent and you're waiting for waiting for that assistance check to come through. Is it approved? Is it coming? Your landlord's asking about it. It's very stressful. So understandably, this was the biggest critique. We also had to pause the program in 2022. So that's understandable. But the other main sentiment was that we still need help. So those were the three most common responses we got in the open-ended question. Thank you. It was frustrating that it took so long, and please help us. We still need help. So now I'm gonna, that kind of wraps up the survey itself, but now I'm gonna take this and kind of put it into context of our community. So I did talk about the eviction prevention rent assistance program. That's what we have available now. It is available currently through Community Youth Services, Family Support Center, and PIPE, Partners in Prevention Education. And they all work together. Our office works with them to kind of make sure everything's in alignment, and it's a new program. It's been a learning process. And as we know, the document recording fees are not always the most stable in form of revenue for programs. And so we don't really know what it's going to be looking like in the future. There's also limited short-term rent assistance that people can kind of call around and see if any faith communities, school districts, and some homeless service agencies can provide some rent assistance. And at that point, it's usually maybe a few $100s or maybe a 1 month. It's usually not enough for people to kind of catch up if they've fallen behind.
The question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so the program that is covered here with the document recording fees, is that the only resource we're using for a rent assistance program countywide?
At this moment, yes.
Is there any other conversation about this or any other possibility of buckets?
At this time, you know, we've been sharing this information and hoping to get that conversation going. So I did present this to the Washington State Senate Housing Committee in January. So, and to some statewide groups. I presented it around the county quite a bit. So we're hoping that this can drive some conversation and figure out a way to hopefully increase funding for rent assistance, because we can, as you see, the need is pretty dire.
Yeah, so out of that 105 million, how short would you say you are? Like, if you were, do you give people a, you know, that we need what we would like to kind of increase it to, right as quickly as we could, or what would...
On it, I really don't know. I couldn't give you a number. I can kind of say that, you know, we averaged about 17 million during COVID, and there's still a need now. So I don't think there's really a limit at this point to what, you know, if Thurston County got 20 million, we'd probably be able to provide 20 million in rent assistance. If, you know, if we got, right now we kind of have to, the eviction prevention rent assistance has to really focus on specifically, you know, preventing evictions, and only having a screening tool to try to make sure we're reaching the people who are most at risk for homelessness. And so those people who just need to get caught up, or maybe they have a landlord who's just trying to be nice and you know, not serving that notice and not evicting them, they're not going to qualify, even though they need it just as much too. But maybe they're just not right at risk of becoming homeless or being evicted. So when the resource is limited, the screening tool has to be a little bit more picky.
Yeah, you know, of those limited short-term rent assistance, those are really tough things for people in this situation. Some people to ask for that kind of help, you know, from make a call to a church or, you know, somewhere. I really feel for them. I've been on the other end of people calling, you know, and asking. We years ago got a lot of those questions at the YWCA. You know, can you help with the rent? Or it's just so painful. I didn't know you had such a painful job.
Yeah, it was rough at times to hear some stories all day, taking these calls. Councilor Delha.
Hi, Lisa. Nice to see you. One of the things I was thinking about when you talk about like the hierarchy, right? Everyone is in need, and then how do you do that? Is there any touch points for those that didn't meet that immediate need to say, maybe talk to Dispute Resolution Center? Like, is there like, not like the choose your own adventure, but like other touch points, like we couldn't do this, so they weren't just dropped. What does that look like of maybe any other resources or mediation or something?
Yeah, so the organizations are social service organizations, and hope are working with, so the difference with EPRA that I didn't mention here is that it also goes with some case management. So the people who are part of this program, engaged in it and receiving the rent assistance, also engage in some case management for housing stability. The social services organizations, housing services organizations can share especially when we have a countywide rent assistance webpage on the county website that shares the dispute resolution and other, you know, links to other resource lists. It's you know, yeah, everyone does their best to share what's available, but it is, when it comes down to it, it's limited. I am really happy and pleased to see that the cities have been contracting with Dispute Resolution Center to continue that mediation. landlord tenant issues are covered now through this Olympia, Lacey, and Tumwater. And I'm not quite sure if Thurston County has completed their contract, but they're working on that too, if they haven't yet. So the difference is with the Dispute Resolution Center eviction resolution pilot program before, they were able to find out where the person who served the eviction was in the process of getting their rent assistance, and kind of work with them and the landlord and kind of ease some of those so like in tandem with rent assistance, when there was a lot of rent assistance, it worked really great because the landlords were able to be like, okay, so I know that rent is coming through rent assistance. We can hold off, or we can create a repayment plan if that doesn't come through. So I feel like it's still the housing stability is still an issue when if there's not enough income for the tenant to be able to make up the back rent that they owe.
Right. One of the things, Elisa, that we've seen in Tumwater, I know 2 examples where the owners did not want to do dispute resolution center, right? They did not agree to. So what happens in those instances when both parties won't come together? Like, what does the person do? What does the renter do? I mean, I'm not asking you to solve that, but you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
there's
I mean,
examples.
they basically have to go through legal process then when it
Yeah.
comes down to it, and hopefully have a good legal counsel. And so statewide, we have the eviction defense line. So that's where tenants can call and get assigned or get connected to their local Thurston County Volunteer Legal Services or Northwest Justice Project eviction attorneys. And I'm going to actually talk about that in a I don't know if it's the next slide, but and the eviction resolution pilot program during COVID, it was mandatory that landlords participate. And so now the difference is that it's not. So there's a few differences, but it's still incredibly beneficial. And I'm really happy to see that the cities are supportive of doing that, of helping fund Dispute Resolution Center to provide that service.
Thanks, Lisa.
All right, so we can talk about evictions here. So we're already seeing a rise in evictions. This means there's an increased demand and costs for those legal aid organizations. It's a increased demand on the court system. The issue with having an eviction on your records is creating future housing stability for tenant families. And eviction is a leading contributor to homelessness. It's something that we know, and I'll show you some data to support that. If you look at 2023, while emergency rent assistance, the COVID rent assistance was available, and the Dispute Resolution Center, because they both kind of ended around the same time. If the average number of evictions filed in Thurston County per month was 47.8, and then the average for the second half of the year, when these programs were no longer available, the average per month was 73.6. So we are in real time here seeing an unprecedented rise in evictions. I believe October there was like 98 evictions filed. And when there were some in the first few months as low as 40. So we're seeing evictions doubling in some months. Last year in 2023, the Thurston County Homeless Census Survey, our point in time count, had an extended survey where we asked participants who were actively experiencing homelessness at the time that they filled this survey out, what led to your homelessness? The top 2 causes were job loss, unemployment, and eviction, loss of housing. We also asked, what support do you need to obtain permanent housing? And the number one method of support that was reported was rent assistance and more affordable housing. So we know directly from our community members who are experiencing homelessness here that rent assistance is crucial when it comes to preventing homelessness and also making housing more accessible for people who have experienced homelessness. So I'm hoping that over the next year, we kind of follow along all of this data. And in the 2024 homeless census point in time count, it was just done this January, and the preliminary data will be out pretty soon, but we'll be able to compare it. We asked these same questions, so we'll be able to see if that's still, you know, if this is an ongoing trend. And responding to homelessness costs more than preventing evictions and keeping people housed. An increase in homelessness means additional financial, emotional strain on the homeless crisis response system, shelter capacity, homeless service agencies, frontline staff. It's strain on our community services overall, behavioral health services, our hospitals, schools, law enforcement, incarceration. And we've done a lot of work through the Rights of Way initiative to clear some of our local homeless encampments. And so an increase in homelessness could mean a reemergence of encampments. And also thinking about the human impact homelessness has on kids. It interrupts their education and it has lifelong impacts on their health and well-being. And we know that people who are homeless have higher rates of illness and die on average 12 years sooner than the general US population. And homelessness creates new health problems for people and it exacerbates existing ones. So we're really looking at the need for rent assistance and the lack that we have right now in our community. We're expecting to see an increase in homelessness, and our recommendation is to continue to support legislation, policy, to increase funding for rent assistance and rent stabilization. This year, there was a rent stabilization bill in the legislature and it did not pass, it died. And so over this next year, if our community can come together to be ready to continue to sound this alarm to our state legislatures and to and locally, so that we can come together and really figure out a way to prevent the wave of homelessness that we've been expecting, and we're starting to see with the increase in evictions. We're having some real-time data. I feel like sometimes where we say, you know, we're going to see this happening, we expect to see this happen, and then we jump to, oh wow, that happened. Look at what happened. And so I just want to say that we have some really good real-time data with the eviction numbers, and then now with the annual homeless census point in time count, that we can see what's happening now, and we should use that data and to act. So thank you for listening. This was a joint project with the Office of Housing and Homeless Prevention at Thurston County Public Health, with a lot of help from our epidemiologist as well, and the partner organizations that were part of the ERAP and TRAP program, the COVID rent assistance programs. And sorry to start out your mornings with such a bummer, but it's what's going on.
Well,
I
thank
think
you for the presentation. It's obviously very sobering and illustrates, I think, just sort of the challenges that we have. It's like every time we open a new project that has some units that help people or provide some more affordable units here and there, you know, that's always like a good reason to celebrate, but the depth of the task is sometimes difficult to grasp. So I think it's really helpful for us to take a step back and just kind of have a glance at how big the scope is and what's at stake as well. Joan, I think you were about to say something.
Well, I was just going to say, and you know, that probably already knows that the rents are going to go up again and continually. I'm a renter, and you know, landlords have an idea of what they should get for their unit or their house or their whatever, and you know, that's what's so painful. You know, it just what causes it keeps happening, you know, and you just wanna, like putting your finger in a dike or something, you know. So, well, thanks for coming this morning, and yeah, it isn't, you're giving both the good news, bad news, you know, you're doing, anytime a program's doing all it can do, it's, you know, hurrah, hurrah, you're doing a great job. So
Thank
thank,
you.
yeah.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah.
Any
And
other?
if you have any questions, you can probably send them to Brad and then any follow-ups or anything, and then Brad can send them to me or other people in our office.
Yeah,
I'm
and
just gonna interrupt you at the RHC and say, by the way, I have a question about,
Okay.
see if other people have the same question.
yeah. So a couple of quick items for the General Government Committee. We are going to be having a joint tour with the Planning Commission for your first work session, first meeting in April. As I'm checking my calendar and I lost the date, I believe on the 9th, we're scheduled for a work session, joint work session with the Planning Commission. We're going to be doing a housing tour of the community. We will be sending out some materials probably by the end of next week for you to have some preparation time for that. I'm sure we'll be touching on everything related to housing, from building new housing, maintaining existing housing, rental, and everything else. So I just want to mention that before that we have that event.
Thank you, Brad.
Michael, I have just a general question. This might be
Yeah.
a good ask it since we're going on this tour.
Sure.
Are we going to, is it still in our purview here as this committee to talk about that tax deal with with builders and all of that kind of thing? I forgot
Do you
now.
mean the multifamily
Yeah,
housing tax exemption? Is that what you mean?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think this committee has, if there were an ordinance about that, I think it would emanate from the General Government Committee. Yes.
Yeah.
I'd like that topic to come back up and talk about it again, because it's time for us to talk about it, I think.
Yeah, I will mention a couple of things. I think it's definitely timely for us to provide another report on the annual basis of where we are in the program. I'm just a little concerned to delve too deeply into it in terms of our overall work program. It wasn't something we'd identified in our work plan to work on this year. We do know it's something that the council wants to address, as well as sort of the broader picture of what kind of incentives can we offer. My suggestion is we are going to be taking a much closer look at what incentives we can have for permanent supportive housing beyond this 8-year, 12-year, and even the 20-year allowed under the multifamily tax exemption. So I would recommend that we fold that discussion into that larger discussion that we'll be having as part of the housing element update and the development code update over the next couple of years.
That's discouraging, because yeah, that's not what people are asking for. People in the community are not happy about this, and not happy that the council hasn't talked about it. Again, we said out loud at council, I don't know if that was in these, since we've had a changeover of leadership or whatever, but
if the council wishes to make that a priority this year, they can do that. But we would ask as the staff that you also look at what else can come off of our work program, so we can look at that. It's a balancing act for us in terms of just our staff time and availability to do that kind of work.
right.
If you followed what happened in Olympia in terms of the amount of work they did and the coordination they had in terms of sort of the evaluation program, unfortunately, it's a little bit more than just a quick code change, I think, to make some changes there. And I think if we're going to do this topic justice, we'll need to spend the appropriate amount of time on it.
So you're saying we should talk about this at council if we want to raise it up, and then
Correct.
lower something else.
Exactly.
We would have to take something off the plan. Like, we would have to do less other things in order to add it on, I think, because we're talking probably, Brad, hundreds of staff hours probably.
It would probably be, in my estimate, probably a couple hundred hours of staff time.
Well, it's a pertinent issue. We're talking about housing, we have commitment to housing and all of the stuff that has to do with this. And this is just an unsettled thing right now among certain parts of our, I started to say our congregation, of our community. And I just think we'd be well served to talk about doing that. So anyway, I don't know, would we do that? Leader Michael, would you know how we would go about it, or?
Well, we essentially sort of already set kind of the work plan. Essentially, the executive team sets the work plan and we sort of consent to that as a council. So I think we would probably have to look at the agenda for the upcoming year, and as a council of the whole, probably decide if there is an ordinance or work that is projected to be done this year that should come off the agenda, and then add the MFT onto the agenda, which is like, I think we would probably want to have a conversation with you, Brad, as well as Lisa, to see if there would be recommendations for something that would be commensurate that could be pushed off. I think the other thing to consider is that right now, I don't think there are any projects in the queue for the MFT currently. So in terms of timeline and weighing whether it makes sense to do something now versus later, like that doesn't mean that a project couldn't emerge a week from now that we have no idea exists, right? But essentially, if there are things that if we were to work on them now that would result in change and are more immediate, I think that's what we would weigh, right? Is like, in terms of balancing the workload, if the MFT is not being utilized right now, maybe that's an opportunity cost, or maybe someone comes out of the woodwork. But if that means dropping other work that would be helping people in the meantime, I think that's sort of the decision point that we would have as a group.
So the project on down there, the Glen Wells project, that's one of them. The one that's down.
Well, we've already
We already approved that.
I know
Yeah.
that, but I mean, that's an example of why we need to do it. I mean, we're encouraging people to come and do their building or do their stuff. We need to have a conversation about this as an option for them, or what we want to do with it. I mean, I don't think it's wise to wait to see if there's somebody in the queue or that's going to come. I think we have to have, we have to set some kind of a policy and have it. What about
we do have a policy. Like, I understand you have concerns about what the policy is, but we literally have a policy.
Yeah, and it's controversial among our community at this point. And that's what council and committees and things are for. We need to respond to it. I mean, it's not the first time it's come up. It came up years ago when it was happening, and we've agreed that it should be reviewed. We talked about that. And we talked about it 2 years ago, and we talked about it a year ago. And,
Yeah.
it's just one of those
I
things.
think that we're going to have a review. Like, I think we're going to get I don't know how you would describe it, Brad, but like a briefing on how it's currently operating and what we've achieved with it. Like, I think we're going to do that. I think what you're
It was
asking
after the comprehensive plan elements.
Yeah, I think what you're asking for is that we redraft the ordinance, right? Like, what I think you want is a change in what the policy actually is, which is different from a review of how the policy is performing. Ideally, the review of how the policy is performing informs what action we take in terms of redrafting. Like, in terms of the order of operations and process, what makes sense to me is that we do have a briefing on how the policy is performing, what the current status is, and things along those lines. And then that informs whether it makes sense to add this to an agenda for drafting a new ordinance or changing a policy, and therefore dropping something else off of it. But Doesn't that seem like the logical first step? Is we need to sort of take a sober accounting of how it has performed, what it's done, and then that sort of informs whether we want to make a change.
I agree with that, and ask questions, talk about how it impacts the city financially, who bears the burden of these tax things, how is it impacting our housing, how is it affecting, what our goals are in housing people, and that kind of thing. Yes, I'm.
And I don't also, I don't necessarily, I just also want to say, I don't necessarily disagree that maybe changes to it are appropriate. Because when we enacted the MFTE, we were also looking at instances where the market was so challenging that we even just needed market rate units, because there were certain areas of the city where it just didn't, we wouldn't even be able to get someone to do a multifamily thing because the rental housing market hadn't exploded in the way that it has in terms of rent cost and profitability.
Right.
So like it makes sense to do a deep dive and a look and an accounting just from the fact that the rental housing market today looks very different than it did in 2016 and 2017.
Absolutely.
So
That's
I'm
what
not
I'm-
disagreeing.
I
but
don't
Yeah, I
want-
think we're all in agreement. It's the timing of
Yeah.
when.
so Brad, I think
Well, the discussion, I'm just talking about, get it back out and talk about it and see, it may not need an immediate change, or it may be that we do move something or whatever, but I think we need to take the first steps of what Michael just described, is what I'm saying, and it may cause change or whatever. I mean, is it a long, difficult thing, Brad, to prepare for a conversation like that?
It depends on the level of the conversation you want. If you want a snapshot of where we are, that can be done in a fairly rapid rate. I'm looking ahead to your April meeting. We've got 4 items scheduled already for that. So I'm going to take a quick look at your May meeting. We could do a report out on the status of the program at your May meeting. We also have 3 items on that, but at the same time, we're also talking about housing at your May meeting. So that's appropriate as part of that.
So the status of the program with some explaining about what the program is and how it impacts the city to give these tax incentives and tax breaks and all of that. That's the conversation in the community. And so, yeah, if what you're talking about in reviewing the program, how it works, how we've used it, or, and then the impacts to both the city and to our housing goals would be 2 things that I would hope that would be in there. And I'm not saying that then we jump to some, big change or something, but we start this conversation again, because like Michael said, we're in a different time.
Yeah, so I would caution, we can provide information on where we are in the program in terms of who's using it, what the program itself is set up to do. If we're going to delve deeper into what the cost to the community is, that's going to require additional work. And I'm not sure if we'll have the staff availability to cover that level of work. We can certainly outline the steps of further evaluation of the program, talk about this is what we need to do to answer those questions. But I don't think we would be ready or have the capacity to do that at the May meeting.
Would this I understand that, yeah. So then that would stimulate other questions that could be at another meeting, and
It would at least provide you an outline of the process by which we would have to evaluate the program, and then you can have that discussion about, well, what kind of resources do you want to devote to that? And if so, what changes do you think you'll make elsewhere? I apologize. I want to mention something also very quickly. The Wildland Urban Interface issue appears to have been settled at the state legislature. That has come off as a requirement as part of our code update that you'll be seeing here shortly for the building code. That means that we are restarting our urban forestry amendment process again. So we've got the 3 ordinances that are now going to be considered for tree preservation, street trees, and landscaping. That's built into our program that we intended to do that this year. Now, I just want to give you a heads up that that is going to be coming probably late spring into the summer as part of this part of your process.
Wow, that's good news. So did you say that we're going to do the update or whatever we're going to do on the tree ordinance? Is that part of it?
Yeah, we have now cleared the barrier that we had where we had thought that the state requirements on the wildland urban interface would really interfere with what we intended to do. It appears that those code amendments have been pulled because the state is now going to redo all the mapping, and that process will take probably a 1.5 to 2 years to complete. So we have a window to finish our work and then be ready for when the next round of state updates come through.
Great, good news.
Lisa, I see you have your hand up too.
Yeah, I didn't want to jump in too quickly, but first of all, I just want to say how grateful I am for the highly competent folks we have working for the city of Tumwater. Brad and Mike have done an outstanding job. The multifamily tax exemption is not a program that I've had the opportunity yet to delve into in a whole lot of detail, but I'm looking forward to that. I just want to reiterate kind of what I've been hearing. Essentially, it sounds like you are all interested in understanding how this existing program that you adopted a few years ago has been implemented. That absolutely is a component of looking at, anytime you do a comprehensive plan update, you want to see what are our existing conditions, where are we now? And then in the context, I think, so my familiarity from a general procedural standpoint is we're going to be talking about the housing element as a component of our required comp plan update. We've got a whole series of additional requirements that we are now obligated to review according to an updated Growth Management Act statute. The multifamily tax exemption program is a component of implementation of housing policies along with a wide variety of other strategies. And I think, looking at the existing data, getting you information about what the program has been doing, who's utilized it, how many units, that type of thing, as Brad said, is pretty easy to pull together. And then in the context of the comp plan update, absolutely, you can have the policy level question and discussion about strategies and methodologies to try and address this issue of rents that are causing a huge amount of homelessness. Generally speaking, rising costs are due to a lack of supply, and I think that's a supply issue up and down the income spectrum. So just wanted to add that component, and as well as my thanks to Brad for being so articulate in understanding these programs, as well as talking about our process at a staff level of trying to prioritize all of the work that is important to the community. So that's all. Thank you.
He's been doing this good job and telling us yay, nay, and this and that and the other. Oh dear, here comes the money guy. And Brad's been at this for years and years. We have all appreciated him beyond degree, Lisa. So he's one of the best fellows you could have. I don't know about this other guy who's come on now.
Yeah. Also, very quickly, I'd like to mention that at your June 14th, 2023 meeting, we had a discussion of the status of the multifamily tax exemption program, and the manufactured home park preservation was also part of that. If you want additional information that really hasn't changed probably since we had that discussion about the status of the MFT program, the staff report and the presentation, I think, do a good job of indicating how the program is being used, what the next steps could be, and that kind of thing. after reviewing that material, if there's additional things that we could try to address as part of the May meeting that build on that, I'd be happy to look at that.
So it sounds like we have some homework assignments to,
Oh.
like, we can have a May meeting with an update on this. And then if we, as council members, all review minutes and the materials from that meeting, then Brad, we could contact you with additional questions that might be unanswered by those materials to also include in the May meeting.
Yeah, I think that would be an appropriate action.
Can we get those resent to us in a link, or at least tell me where to get it on
Yeah,
our website?
I will go ahead and send the council members the link to that particular item.
Thank you.
When was that we discussed it, Brad?
June 14th of 23.
Thanks.
Okay, so sounds like we sort of have a next steps plan for the May meeting, and we, as council members, have some homework assignments in anticipation of that too. If there aren't any other questions, are we good to move along to the next agenda item?
Yeah.
The money, as
Roy, did you have some input into our conversation?
I do not. I was just trying to time it, so I knew I was up next on the agenda, and I was,
Okay.
but I missed time. I got in there a little too early, but
all right.
my topic
Well,
is pretty fast.
With that, why don't we go ahead and pivot and to resolution number R2024-007, amending the 2024 fee resolution. Take it away, Troy.
Okay, can you see the presentation?
Yep.
Okay, change this to present mode. Okay, this will be pretty fast and we can get you going on your way. Basically what happened with the fee schedule when you passed it in late November, is we accidentally left a few things off. So there's a few small changes. We'll highlight them here in the red line. These are mostly community development fees. These are pretty small. We thought about not even changing them and just letting it go, but this next one was the real reason we thought we got to bring this back to council and get this fixed. So this is the school impact fees for Tumwater School District that did not get updated. So we need to update those so that we collect the right amount of money on new developments for the school district and get them their money. So this resolution is just to update the fee schedule with these changes. Most of them are pretty small. The school district one is significant. And like I said, we want to make sure they get their money on that. And so we're simply asking to place this on the consent agenda for your next regular council meeting. And I can certainly take any questions if you have them.
Does anyone have any questions? Pretty simple item, I think.
Pretty simple and straightforward and a much less heavy topic than the ones we've been covering.
Well, if there aren't any questions, I think I would entertain a motion to place resolution R2024-007 on the consent agenda for the March 19th city council meeting with the recommendation that it be approved.
So move.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Kathy and seconded by Councilmember Dolhoff. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, motion passes unanimously. Thanks, Troy. That was
Thanks.
Thank you.
so I think that brings us to the end of our agenda. And unless there's any other questions or anything, I think we have some next steps planned, Joan, for the meeting in May, and
I appreciate
we'll take
that.
from there.
Thank
Absolutely.
you for the discussion time. I appreciate that a lot. And you're not going to make a speech as a newly elected person here to end?
I'm not. I will. I'll save you all the trouble and the eye rolling and defer.
Okay.
All right. Well, with that, we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.